Hi, we're talking about Your Money Matters on NDTV Profit, and my name is Alex Matthew. We speak about simple personal finance concepts that hold you in good stead. And today, I'd like to talk about loans that you might have and sometimes the multiple EMIs that you tend to juggle. How do you manage them if they're getting out of hand? And what are the strategies that you employ? If you have a mortgage, does that mean that you need to have life insurance? And what type of life insurance is appropriate? Some of those questions I've listed out right now. I'm sure that a lot more will emerge over the course of this conversation. I have with me in studio today Rohit Shah, who is the founder and chief executive officer at GYR Financial Planners. Thank you so much, Rohit, as always, for taking the time.
Thanks, Alex. So glad you're taking up this important subject. Let's deep dive.
Absolutely. Let's talk about it. Let's start talking about it because the mentality and the approach to taking a loan has changed very dramatically from when my parents were young, where there was an aversion to debt. There is a lot more comfort today when it comes to young people taking loans for things that they can't afford at the moment. Is that something that you witnessed?
Yeah, that's right. And you know what we are seeing is that, for example, the gadgets, the smartphone, a lot of this electronics, they've found a nice way to sort of penetrate it much deeper, sell it, breaking this into a monthly EMI. And you know, technology has also made it a lot more easier. And you know, the young people have long years to go, so it's easier to take a credit risk on them.
Wait. So the argument against that is a lot of people say, hey, wait, buy now, pay later, that's not a loan, is it?
We have to see the math, you know, because essentially if somebody is going to give you a period to pay, there has to be some interest cost baked in somewhere.
So can you explain that?
I think the trick is the upfront cost, the processing charges, what do you pay today and versus what do you pay over a bit of time. Sometimes the product manufacturer is funding these kind of expenses, so it's not directly visible. But you know, any financing which comes either from a loan company or from the product manufacturer bakes into the cost of the funding.
So it is a loan?
It is, we can call it whichever way, whichever word we want to use, Alex. It is.
Okay, but you were making a point. These products are available that did not exist maybe 20, 25 years back. But what else is there with regard to the mentality of taking loans?
I think consumerism, one-way lifestyle aspiration is a one-way traffic. Everybody wants to have iPhone. Everybody wants to have nice gadgets. Everybody wants to go abroad, take a holiday, and pay over a period of time with EMIs. And I think technology has made it easier. The credit profiling, all the data aggregation, and I think the ease of convenience. If 15 years ago, Alex, we would need to visit a bank or go to a Bajaj Finance, and now everything happens online. So it's so much more easier to sort of, take the loan.
So talking about consumerism and talking about the idea of taking multiple loans, there is this perception that this credit score, which is now easily accessible to practically everybody, with a few swipes of your phone, you can take a look at what your credit score is out of 900, and there are several credit bureaus that do that for you. The tendency and the inclination for a lot of people is, I want my score up. And so the perception is that by taking loans, even if I can afford it up front, I'm creating a credit history, and thereby if I'm paying back on time, which is the intention always, I'm creating a record of having paid on time, so that in the future, when I do need to take a larger loan, that credit history is made. Is that the right approach?
Can I have a joke?
Yes, of course.
If there's a new hospital opening up in my area and giving discount.
Do you want to get admitted?
So if you don't need a loan, why do you need a credit history? I mean, it can be of use, and there are better ways to manage that. For example, responsible credit card usage is a good way to look at. And I think most of the upper middle class families in India find no other way to buy a house but have a home loan.
Yes.
So, you're going to get credit history anyway, whether you want or not, just to take a loan.
But the point is that when you do go out to buy that house, in order to get the best possible rate, you are creating a credit history so that you get the best rate. Is that the right approach?
Not necessary, but probably it's a good idea to check if there are any wrong entries, if your credit score is negatively impacted because of something in the past, then you may have to take some actions. But just to proactively build a credit history because you're going to need it in future and take a loan, that may not be a good idea in isolation.
Okay, so let's talk about a few thumb rules to follow, right? And of course, personal finance is personal, and everybody has their own set of expectations and things that they need to do. But there are certain rules that hold for everybody. When it comes to multiple EMIs or even the total quantum of an EMI as a percentage of your take home on an ongoing basis, what are the rules to follow, Rohit?
Sure. Usually, the EMI should not exceed about 30 to 40% of your take home. Above 40% is a serious red flag. And, one of the thumb rules that we are recommending to manage your money budget is 30-30-30-10, the rule of 30-10, which is 30-30-30-10, which means if you have 100 rupees of take home, at least 30 rupees or more should be saved. Up to 30 rupees can be your EMI. Up to 30 rupees is all your normal spends, groceries, travels, education for kids, etc. 10 rupees is your emergency, buffer, and planned expenses. So, up to 30%, and the max 40%, because beyond 40%, the banks can also reject it, and it can, with multiple loans, that can be a problem.
Oh, that's interesting. So I would think that somebody living on rent, for example, that 30%, and if they don't have loans, that 30% that they would normally spend on EMIs becomes available to them. Is that the way that you would look at it?
That's right. So, if you don't have a home loan, then that means including rent, you could go up to 50-60% of your take home. The other way to look at this, Alex, is that if you're at least saving 30 to 40% of your take home, that's taking care of your goal. Then the rest 60%.
You can do whatever you want with it. And that's the approach that I have as well.
Absolutely.
I try to save 30% and I transfer it out from my salary as soon as I get it. And everything else, my wife has no problem with me spending.
Wonderful. That's a win-win.
I learned that from you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about credit card debt. And if you have multiple EMIs, why is this a big problem? Because you're talking about 3% per month in certain cases when you roll things over, right?
Alex, they say that when you have money to solve a problem, you don't have a problem. So, when you have a multiple EMIs and you understand what you're doing and, you cash flow to take care of that loan, then that's fine. But, if you realize that paying 36% a year is just too much, then I think it might be a good idea to relook at and restructure your liability profile. So I think if the general borrowing costs are around, if your fixed deposits and your liquid funds give you 6-7%, and the personal loans will be 12-14%, car loans is 8-10%, then why should I pay 36%? Right? So it's a huge red flag that, we are just too much overpaying for the convenience of credit card swipes.
So, okay, and this happens, and for the lay public, for a lot of people who might be experiencing this for the first time, rolling over your credit, that is paying the minimum balance, still attracts a charge?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the moment you get into paying anything less than the full amount, the moment you say that I'm just going to pay the minimum, then you pay the overdue interest on the whole amount. And have you ever heard of any credit card company anywhere in the world going bankrupt?
No, I haven't.
That means this is one of the most profitable business in the world.
Which is why a lot of banks want to get into it.
That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
It's aggressively sold. A lot of people call you asking, do you want another credit card?
That's
what are the rules? Should you have multiple credit cards in your opinion?
The idea is that to keep things simple. So, based on the needs that one has, like I like to have, American Express Travel, Platinum Travel credit card, which gives me Taj, vouchers that my family loves it, right? And that's enough for me. But you might want to build a credit card with, let's say, Indian Oil, with petrol, which gives you a lot of petrol, liters, compatibility. Some of the Axis Bank credit card might be good for, let's say, a lounge access, right? So based upon the need, but the fewer the better.
Or something that gives you frequent flyer miles, etc.
That's right. That's right.
So if you're traveling a lot, or if you're doing one travel in a year and you want to fund that using your credit card points.
That's right. That's right. So basically, what's the need? Why do I need to have a credit card? The fewer the better, because one of the first rule of financial independence is not to have a loan. And similarly, when you go further down the line, keeping things simple is one of the very, very important ingredient of being on your own and being financially free.
Okay, so let's talk about scenarios where people may have over leveraged, and by that basically I mean if somebody's taken on too much debt. This can happen very easily, especially in the scenarios, Rohit, that we've spoken about. If somebody is already got a pending loan, they've gone out and maybe spent on a white good that they could not afford because it was just a little too expensive, and they've taken a monthly payback option. They've only paid the minimum due for 3 months. And this is a scenario where very quickly you have a domino effect play out and the debt burden increases very dramatically. What is the order in which you would start reducing this debt?
So, see, when you have multiple EMIs, the first criteria usually is the cost of the borrowing. And, we should probably make a matrix and look at the different EMIs and what's it costing, what is the outstanding amount, what is the tenor, what is the EMI. So usually, the more costlier loan should be addressed on a FIFO basis. So, we take it
first in, first out, yeah.
First in, first out. So the most costliest, is first out is what we should try. But sometimes what happens is that if the most costliest loan, needs you to prepare more to repay, it is going to take longer. Sometimes you need a psychological relief. You need to free up yourself, and you need to have those small quick wins to say, yeah, I'm on the way. Right. I'm on the way, I'm doing it. So even, then if you have a smaller loan, something which can make you feel better, that's always a good idea.
Okay. When it comes to getting rid of these, certain times what you have to do, unfortunately, is, and you're between a rock and a hard place in certain situations, right? So the options available are to take on more debt, to pay off a credit card due, for example. And that's not always easy because a bank is going to say that you have a certain amount of overdue loans. You've been paying the minimum due, and you've been rehashing that debt or pushing it further down the road. And so it may not give you the best possible rates. You're going to pay 14-15% on a personal loan, but that's better than 36%.
That's right, always better.
So is that how you do it? Do you approach friends and family? At what point do you do that? At what point do you say you might have to sell assets to say that you need to get rid of this debt because it can become a problem down the road?
Yeah, I think it's a lesser devil. So that, in isolation, we will never recommend personal loan, but compared to credit card, as you rightly said, the math will hugely favor personal loan. And I think also this needs for a family review. People sit together, husband, wife, maybe, grown-up children, and brainstorm. For example, if you minutely review the balance sheet, you might have some hidden assets. For example, what about those assets which are long-term, but they may be underperforming? So, for example, if you have, if you're having a financial assets portfolio, and if you've got defensive assets which are running you 6, 7%, 8%, 9%, it might be a good idea to review them. If you have an older insurance policies, traditional policies, they don't give you like more than 6,
surrender value is there to consider, right?
So, can you relook at that? Is there a value that you can generate? And something might be, for example, if your portfolio is for retirement, then, ideally you don't want to touch it.
Yeah.
But given a 36% scenario, it might be a good idea to tactically take a retreat here and make sure that you overmanage becomes zero and then, go back. One of the joke that I had heard, Alex, and I think is very true, that the creditors have a better memory than debtors.
I wonder why. And unfortunately, unlike ancient times when you had a jubilee, as they used to call it, right, where every certain number of years, all debts would be wiped clean.
Right.
That was what a jubilee was called. That doesn't exist in our day and age, and so debts need to be paid back.
Right.
But having said that, and I interact with a lot of people in a certain I don't want to call it strata, but their earning potential is relatively lower, and they tend to use gold. They tend to, girvi rakhna is the word that they use, right? So you keep gold with a lender. Now, with gold having gone up the way that it has, and most Indian households have gold, would you say that that's an asset that you can consider liquidate?
So leveraging gold can be a good idea. this can help you to ease off the pressure. The gold loans are also interest; they don't have an EMI
Yes.
component,
Yeah.
so it's much easier, to manage with the gold. And if you noted what has happened with Bank of England's gold holdings, if the Bank of England cannot assure you that I will return the same gold, then I don't know about these finance companies. So, that's one aspect that worries me, because, I'm not sure about the custody mechanism in India with the gold loan financing. But, again, if we were into a situation where there are multiple loans, and, we've got 36% off and the gold is sitting idle and doing nothing, this might be a very good option to explore.
Okay, so many options we've already discussed. Now, when it comes to taking a large loan, a mortgage is pretty much the largest that it gets usually, right? Unless you're talking about business loans, and really that's not the audience that we're catering to. We're effectively talking to people that have retail loans, and mortgage is one of them. Is this a good idea to go out and get a term loan, term insurance, life insurance to cover for that mortgage amount?
Yeah. In fact, it is certainly a very good idea, and I would say it is almost mandatory.
It's requirement, right?
It's required. In fact, even the RBI provisions require, and the banks will also nudge you and ask you. Of course, they will use that opportunity to sell you something which may not always be the best of your interest.
Yeah.
But the pure term plan is...
So lenders, when you're going and taking a loan from them, will tell you if it's a large loan, they will say, take a term loan?
That's right. They'll try to upsell that term plan. Maybe they'll try to upsell some other traditional plan. They'll try to sell you, to add that cost upfront for so many years into the loan and convert that into EMI.
Is that a good idea?
No, not required. Not required.
Okay, so then we've established that it's a good idea to take a term insurance policy, which is a plain vanilla.
That's right.
Life insurance policy.
Right.
You pay a premium that does not come back to you for a cover that hopefully you will never need.
That's right.
But what rules would you follow when you're taking this term loan? You've said that you don't like bundled products. It's not something you should do.
That's
and
right.
you said no for traditional policies as well.
We should try and avoid it. That's right.
So therefore, when you're going out to take a term loan, I keep saying term loan, term insurance policy, what should you do?
So I think I'll quickly explain the way financial planning logic is. The idea here is that when the main earner or the co-earner of the family is not there, the liabilities and the need that the families have, they have to be funded. So it needs a bit of a technical work with all the numbers, future value, present value, goal, all that, and there are many calculators available. But maybe if we were to take a thumb rule, then there are many thumb rules. So for example, some people say that include about 8 to 10 times of your annual income for your term plan. I will probably give you a phrase which is going to be easy for both of us to remember. London School of Economics, LSE. So L for loan, S for spends, and E for education.
Okay.
Right? So the term plan should be enough. Your assets should be enough to take care of LSE. You take care of your loans. The spend that the family will have, that they will not have an income and they will need to be a virtual income, and E is for education goal. Now, your assets are not enough, then, the term insurer need to step in. So, for example, if your LSE formula talks about 2 crore and your assets are only 50 lakh, then 1.5 crore should ideally be a term plan.
Okay. And so, but you're talking about the requirement as it stands on that day when you go out and say, there is a gap in what I have right now.
That's right.
But what about future spends that you might have? Because you're talking about a term insurance policy which covers a certain number of years.
That's right.
At what point do you go and revisit and say, I need to buffer this, I need to add on to this and take a second policy?
Yeah, so one is that when there are key changes in your family, like expansion in the family, your income has gone up or you relocated, and at least once in a year that you should revisit the numbers and see if you need to take more. And in many cases, as you build more assets, you can also probably discontinue. Let's say if you have 2-3 term plan, you may not need all of them.
I was just going to ask you that. So obviously in the case of a term plan, there's no surrender value, right?
That's right. That's right.
You just stop paying and you don't have that available
right.
to you. So that's one expense that you reduce.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
So there, in this situation, in what situations would you say that you don't need a term policy.
That's correct. So if your answer to LSC, right, the loans that a family will have to pay in your absence, the spends that the family will need, and that's a corpus, right? That's a between
which you built over a period of time.
Correct. And the E is the education spend that a family will need. If your LSE number is, let's say, working out to, maybe let's say upper middle class family, it could be 5 crore. And the family already has assets of 2 crore. Then the gap is 3 crore, the gap insurance has to fund. But what happens if the family already has 5 crore? Then there is no gap. Then you don't need insurance. Now family had a 3 crore assets, they took a 2 crore term plan, and let's say 5 years down the line, what has happened is the assets are now more than 5 crore. So they may not need to continue that 2 crore term plan. So the other trick to keep in mind, Alex, here is that not everybody needs to take a term plan for 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, right? So usually you time it around retirement when all the key goals are over. But if your forecast is telling you that you're going to accumulate a sizable wealth in 10 year or a 15 year, then you can reduce that duration of the term plan, because the lesser period, lesser is the cost. So what we are trying to do, Alex, here is that we are trying to balance the risk management versus the cost of risk management. Every rupee matters. Right?
Every rupee does matter. And ultimately, you're covering a gap. And if that gap no longer exists, then there's no reason. And so therefore, if you don't have a dependent, a financial dependent, then what is the need to get an insurance policy? Because ultimately, you're protecting against the loss of future earnings for anybody that you leave behind.
Yeah, that's right. So it's all about dependencies in your absence.
Thank you so much, Rohit, for joining in and for this lovely conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting.
All right, there you go. So that conversation was aimed at helping you understand how to manage your debt, and also that last leg had to do with why you would need a term insurance policy and the rules that you should follow.